All right. I think it's about time. We're going to get started here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much to the assemblage for hosting this and providing this amazing opportunity for us to gather here and discuss some of the latest and greatest in nutritional and exercise science and how we're going to come out of this COVID crisis. So, greetings and welcome to the 19th installment of Biohack the World, New York City. And we are so grateful to have you here. We have a wonderful program for you this evening with some of the biggest names in health and functional medicine in New York City. In case you're new to this show, my name is David Choi, and I'm the executive producer and the host of Biohack the World, a live biohacking show that we host in New York City and Miami. And like everyone here sheltering in place, we want answers. We want to know what it's going to take to never have a pandemic cripple us and threaten our stability the way that COVID-19 is doing to us today. What's incredible is that we have this unique opportunity to hit the pause and reset button on our health, to take an introspective look into ourselves, our daily practices and habits, and to rewrite our code to effectively upgrade our operating system. We've been socially conditioned since birth to take part in this vastly unsustainable system that has long been decoupled from any consideration for ecological sustainability. We've abandoned our balance with nature, opting instead for this infinite growth, consumer-driven market economy on a planet with finite resources and extremely delicate and interconnected life systems. And gone unchecked, our current paradigms and ways of thinking not only threaten our immediate health, but are eventually going to drive us all off of a cliff. Is that not insanity? No rational person wants to hurt themselves, and no rational person wants to hurt others. But at the same time, our wants, desires, and behavior that have been so deeply ingrained in us have extremely deleterious global consequences. From the catastrophic environmental impact to the exploitation of workers to the plundering of natural resources from indigenous populations and economies around the world, the list of human grievances and injustices go on and on and on. We suffer from a value system disorder because for at least a century since the Spanish flu of 1918, we actually didn't have an opportunity like this to all stop, breathe, and listen to what nature has been trying to communicate to us all along. And think for a moment about all those who for years and years were woken up to this bleak reality that all the things we buy, watch, and consume, all our decisions and behaviors that feed our insatiable need for modern conveniences are actually decidedly inconvenient for our planet and do very little to protect our brothers and sisters around the world to ensure the health and happiness for all of humanity. And imagine that for so long, these crusaders for equality and justice have been keenly aware of all of our social inequities, but like passengers stuck on a runaway freight train, we've had no practical way to change course. And also consider for a moment that 1/3 of our GDP, the primary indicator for the health of our economy, is healthcare revenue. And so therefore, the more sick and dying people we have in our country, the greater our prosperity. Is that any real way to measure the success of our nation? You've been watching it on television since you were a child. All the calls for the help for millions of people on this planet, malnourished, living in abject poverty, and not just in Africa, but right here in New York City as well. While our money wheel continues to spin and spin, rewarding some of the worst actors in the system. This, when we have the resources, technology, and knowledge to feed, clothe, and educate every single man, woman, and child on this planet, but we purposely choose not to. With all the good and intelligence in this world, we ought to rethink and redesign our antiquated systems that are no longer serving us. And that's what we have to do as biohackers. We are futurists because we have to be. We've taken it upon ourselves to adopt a moral obligation, a sworn duty to look after members of our society who are in the throes of all kinds of health challenges, mental, physical, individually, and collectively. Let's seize upon this opportunity to rewrite our operating manual from the ground up. For once, we all have reprieve from the unceasing demands of our frenetic pace of life. For once, we don't have bills to pay tomorrow and people to see now. We're not stuck in some senseless race competing for likes, views, and shares, and largely nothing really meaningful or conducive for global health. Not talking about our friends in functional medicine and fitness. Keep doing what you're doing. We love you. But there are a select few who do think about this day in and day out, so either because we've elected them into office or because they were trained to be this way, or they're health crusaders and activists, and they see our current path for what it is, all its inefficiencies and shortcomings, and desire to present the case for a more sustainable way forward. For once, applying the scientific method to rebuilding a better society, and not politics or corporate interests. And that's what tonight's talk is all about. We're going to share the stories from the front line and our city's leadership, key tips and strategies to live our best life, and ways to help everyone around us do the same. And so here to introduce our esteemed speakers tonight is none other than Dr. Rudy Gurman, CEO and founder of Physiologic in Brooklyn, New York City's premier medical and wellness center that features a full-service Pilates and movement studio, offering a fully integrated approach to healthcare that emphasizes a comprehensive scope of treatment options to target individual ailments and maximize overall health. So without further ado, please help me welcome to the stage, Dr. Rudy Gurman.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we had a 2-hour show planned, but after that, we're done. David, thank you very much. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Great job, David. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We have guests from around the country and a couple from around the world I'm looking at. So this is obviously a worldwide pandemic, and now is the best time for us to all unite in the healthcare space. So I couldn't be more honored to be a co-host this evening with Biohack the World. Dave, you've created such an interesting community and new guests to the show. The inner circle is biohackers or do-it-yourselfers, physicians, biotech enthusiasts. It's really vast, and the group was started before COVID. And now that we're dealing with COVID, I'm going to get into kind of how the evolution of this talk started. But we could not be in a better place and a better time, Biohack the World community, for what you started, David, and what we all believe in. So, David, thank you so much for first allowing me into the group. Thank you, Dr. Jono, for introducing me to the group. It's been fun, David, getting to be a colleague of yours and also a friend of yours. But we had originally put the show together with Borough President Eric Adams, who's going to be joining us at 7:30, because right now he's flying around New York City saving human beings and saving our city. But we had Dr. Tanuj Palvia from Physiologic, regenerative medicine specialist, myself and Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist, and we were going to do an integrative approach to regenerative medicine, but kind of with the movement as medicine as being the forethought, and then preluded into what I'm going to get into, Eric Adams, in a couple moments. But obviously COVID hit us. It hit us faster than anticipated. In New York City, I thought the strongest city in the world, and I kind of was slapped in the face with how hard it hit us and the devastation it's caused, but it looks like we're fighting back. We're off the mat, and here we go. So the purpose of this talk tonight is to talk about COVID and talk about pandemics and what we're dealing with, and just to forecast kind of the speakers. Dr. Jonathan Seitz, close friend of mine, first of all, colleague second, but the doc that's in the trenches at Lenox Hill. He's an OR doc, he's an anesthesiologist. So if you look at the triage through the hospital systems, he's the last line of defense. Then going into Dr. Patty de Blasio, integrative medicine physician, preventative medicine, and innovative medical technologies are at the forefront of her practice. After that will be Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist. And then without further ado, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, potential hopeful next New York City mayor running in the 2021 mayoral election. And this is where I think talks like this are really going to foster innovation and really hack healthcare, because with healthcare providers, wellness providers, and politicians, I think this is really where you get in front of it. So I just want to also thank you, all the civil servants out there worldwide, from politicians to healthcare providers that are in the front lines, to telehealth providers that are transforming their products into online platforms to deliver healthcare via that, to the sanitation workers on our streets, to the New York City cops. They're all risking their lives and their families' happiness. So just want to bow our heads for a count of 10 seconds for everybody that's been lost and everybody that's in the potential of losing someone. So if we could send our good vibes over to them. Okay. Thank you for that, guys. And please do keep praying every night for all the families and loved ones out there that are being inflicted with this. So without further ado, close friend, colleague, Dr. Jonathan Seitz, the doc that's in the trenches. Doc, what do you have for us, sir?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep, we could hear you.
Okay, so maybe I can just continue with just audio, because my video is not working. It says host. Wait. Okay. Now can you see me?
Yep, we can see you.
All right. Great. So my name's John Seitz. I'm an anesthesiologist at Lenox Hill. I've been there about 12 years. I'm just going to give you a few of my observations as to what I've been seeing over the last 6 weeks or so. It's been a pretty surreal kind of seeing it coming and trying to do something and not really being able to do it, seeing the inefficiencies of our world leaders, and kind of seeing kind of a slow motion movie going bad, but not all bad, because there will be some good things at the end of my talk. So let me get into it. Basically what I do at my hospital is I do most typical types of anesthesia for my patients. I also do a fair bit of labor and delivery anesthesia care for pregnant women. And I am not an epidemiologist, I'm not a virologist, and I'm not a statistician. So I'm going to refrain from joining the infectious disease modeling community, which it seems like a lot of people are joining right now. And I think the main impetus for me being in this talk was that I felt particularly, I was particularly sensitized by the fact that so many smart people and so many people with influence were at their computers spending most of their time just trying to predict how bad this was going to get. And once we knew that it was going to get bad, my message was sort of, why don't people figure out what they can do? Why don't we figure out how we can stop this instead of just trying to predict the number of deaths, trying to predict the economic devastation, trying to predict how much the stock market's going to drop? Why don't we figure out what we can do proactively as human beings and as members of our community to stop the spread of the virus? So it's sort of been a learning process for me. And in terms of the modeling, to me, it's sort of a moot point right now, because we know it's going to be bad. We know it already is bad. So why are we trying to figure out whether it's worth our while to go after it? And as Dr. Fauci said, we don't make the timeline, the virus makes the timeline. So I'm going to briefly breeze over some basic science on coronavirus. Corona means crown, and the crown is a circular or spherical lipid bilayer with spike proteins on it, which kind of spike out, which give it the appearance of a crown. So the composition of the virus is a lipid bilayer, spike proteins, and RNA inside. And RNA is simply genetic material that the virus uses for its replication strategy. It's information to make more viruses. That's all the virus cares about. It only wants to replicate. It actually doesn't want to kill you. It actually wants you to stay alive, and it just cares about replication. So everything about viruses is it's a very selfish act, but it just cares about replication. So if you can keep the replication strategy in mind, it can give you a better understanding of the virus, in my opinion. So first of all, the virus is nothing without a host cell. It can't replicate on its own, and it's completely useless without a host cell. In order to get into a host cell, it needs to penetrate or be exposed to oral mucosa, nasal mucosa, or respiratory epithelium. So the virus on your skin, the virus on a surface, the virus somewhere in your house cannot do anything. It needs to get to one of those three places for it to find a receptor. Now that receptor is the ACE2 receptor, otherwise known as the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. Now you maybe have heard of something called an ACE inhibitor before. When I was in med school back in the late 90s, I learned about ACE, which was angiotensin converting enzyme, because we knew about it then. We actually didn't know what ACE2 was, and that's why when I heard about ACE2, I had to go back and read up on it. So it's a receptor that's ubiquitous. It has a lot of functions in the body. It functions in heart function, kidney, the lungs, obviously. It plays a role in hypertension, diabetes, and it's not well understood, but it's relatively ubiquitous in the body, and its main function is converting angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 1 through 7. And it's COVID's main cellular entry point. So it's an easy target, in my opinion, for therapeutics, that if you can block this receptor, you can prevent the virus from entering these cells. So getting back to the replication strategy of the virus, like I said, it's not trying to kill you, it's just trying to replicate. And an asymptomatic carrier is the perfect host. So you can imagine if the virus got inside you and killed you immediately, it wouldn't be that infective because you wouldn't really spread it to people. So the ideal host for the virus is someone who's going to be asymptomatic, is going to feel fine, and is going to walk around. They're going to go to work, they're going to go to a party, they're going to feel fine and be asymptomatic and just spread it around to other people. So the fact that you have that 5 to 7 day period of asymptomatic shedding is a perfect scenario for the virus, and it actually it prefers it that way. Once it does find an ACE2 receptor, there's a little moiety on the spike protein that binds to that ACE2 receptor, and then it begins replicating. And that's when kind of the cascade starts. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it does to the body once that cascade kicks off. And the other thing it does is it triggers that reaction in the lungs. So by irritating your lungs and causing inflammation, it's going to cause you to cough. It's going to cause you to sneeze. And again, that's part of the replication strategy, to get outside your body, to be put into the environment. Now, in terms of the pathophysiology, I'm learning more every day. Again, I am somewhat of an outsider to studying new diseases, and I don't usually dive into these processes all the time. But from what I've read and from my deep dive that I did, I'm sure everyone here on this chat has done their own deep dive. I'm seeing mortality between 2 and 10%, factors being genetic, demographic, and availability of critical care support. I'm seeing males about targeted more than females. Females seem to be a little bit more protected to the virus, meaning I guess the virus is targeting the patriarchy to some degree. Symptoms include fever, cough, shortness of breath, malaise, myalgia, diarrhea, and drop in oxygen saturation. Some of the new symptoms that we're hearing about now is changes in taste and smell being a presenting symptom, and recently hearing about confusion or changes in mental status as a presenting symptom in some patients, in some COVID patients. And in terms of how the virus is spread, there's 4 main routes of transmission. There are 2 primary routes, which are contact and droplet. Contact being you're touching a surface, you're getting the virus on your skin, and then you're touching your face. So again, touching it, you're not going to get it. No big deal if you touch it. But if you touch your face after that, mouth, nose, or respiratory epithelium, that's a transmission. Respiratory droplet is usually a sneeze or a cough. These are droplets between 5 and 10 micrometers. And again, this is what they think is the primary means. Secondary means would be aerosol. And these are much smaller particles. These could potentially be viral particles as small as 120 nanometers in diameter. So very small, very hard to block, and they can float in the air, and they can lay in the air in a closed room for hours. And the fourth one would be fecal oral contact, and that's through, since they found the virus in feces, potentially you could get it through that route. We're not going to talk too much about that. In terms of the havoc that takes place in the body once this virus starts taking over, what I'm learning about now is mainly the dysregulated immune response, or cytokine storm. And that has to do with a kind of a storm of interleukins. As the body mounts, this dysregulated immune response causes all kinds of problems throughout the body. This thus resulting in a hypercoagulable state. So microthrombi, emboli, and blood clots in all different types of places that they're not supposed to be, namely the pulmonary vascular tree, both small arteries and large arteries. So pulmonary emboli, you can imagine the alveoli, little sacs of air covered in tiny capillaries. And then you can imagine those capillaries all being blocked, unable to transmit blood past oxygen in the alveoli, and unable to oxygenate properly. So you got blood entering the lungs, not seeing any oxygen, and then going back to the left side of the heart with a drop in oxygenation. And that's why in a lot of patients, the first thing you're going to see is a drop in oxygen saturation. This then makes it harder for the right heart to pump blood into the heart. So you're having right heart dysfunction. And then these patients become susceptible to superinfection by additional bacteria, and that can lead to their demise and ultimately to their death. So in terms of therapy, supportive care is a buzzword you're going to hear, and that's kind of a catch-all term for there is no therapy, meaning just support the patient and let them cure themselves of the disease. It's not very, no one's really that excited about supportive care, but in someone without an exaggerated immune response, they can fight off the disease on their own. And again, I'm talking about hospitalized patients. I'm not talking about most comers, which is people who get the disease and stay home and they never even come to the hospital. Some additional therapies that are being thrown around, and I'm not going to get into all of them because I'm just realizing I have 1 minute left, is hydroxychloroquine, zinc, vitamin C, melatonin, and vitamin D. So those are some therapies that I'm learning from Eastern Virginia Critical Care Society, which I've been reading. They have some good papers that have been coming out lately. So how are we handling this in the world of anesthesia? One, we're isolating patients, which we haven't really had to do. We're thinking about how the virus is shed in a healthcare setting, and something as simple as oxygen can take a contagious patient and make them incredibly contagious. So you can imagine a nasal cannula blowing oxygen up in the nose, a face mask, putting high pressure onto the patient's mouth, and then creating jets of air, shooting infectious virus all over the room, making it very difficult and very dangerous for healthcare workers. So how can we take care of these patients, give them what they need, but also not get sick in the process so we can continue to help more people? We're obviously isolating them. We're placing breathing tubes using video cameras instead of our traditional means. Certainly, the catch-22 with that is we want to secure their airway for our sakes. We want to place a breathing tube so that they're not shedding virus all over the room. But as we're learning more, we're finding out that those that are getting intubated are having mortality between 60, 70, 80%. So why are we rushing to intubate them anyway? And while people like Elon Musk and others are really excited about building ventilators, if you know the ventilator has an 80% mortality, why are you so excited about building it? And why aren't we thinking about ways to more non-invasive ways of getting oxygen to the patient without jeopardizing the healthcare workers? I was going to say some stuff about testing, but I'm sort of out of time for that. But I will say, from my perspective, it's been an incredible opportunity to collaborate with other doctors. Despite Facebook being a pretty mind-numbing platform, I've actually used Facebook in a lot of positive ways to connect with anesthesiologist-only groups and critical care groups where I'm getting tons of information, collaborating, we're building things, we're using 3D printing to build our own PPE. A lot of people are stepping up, and it's been very inspiring. Lastly, I'm going to give a plug in terms of what we can do. One thing I've been really behind is Masks for All, and that's basically a grassroots campaign started by Jeremy Howard to try to put masks on as many people in our community as possible. And it's not these kind of masks, it's these kind of masks, which are homemade masks, which your grandma can make or your cousin can make, or anyone at home who's on isolation can make these and give them around their community and help stop the spread. And I think that's if you really want to help healthcare workers right now, go down to the subway and hand them out to everyone, because that's really going to help us. So lastly, I know I'm over time, but I'm going to talk about some positive stuff. First of all, our DNA has been bombarded with viral particles, viral information as long as we've been around, and this is no exception. So take solace in the fact that a lot of the things that make us evolved beings come from having received viral DNA in the past. So if you're going to take the good, you got to take the bad, and we've got to get through this. So stay positive, stay encouraged. I think both the ACE2 receptor and the spike proteins are low-hanging fruit in terms of therapeutics. And mitigating the cytokine storm and the hypercoagulable state, I'm excited about that. Lastly, never has been more clear that we need to help others in order to help ourselves. So there's never been a more of a reason, in my opinion, that for your community to move forward, you have to reach out to the people, the lowest common denominators, and ensure their health. Otherwise, your community absolutely will not move forward, and you will never emerge from this crisis. So it's kind of a test, in my opinion, to help everyone around you and move forward. Small acts can have great ramifications. So by you preventing coronavirus in one patient, that could prevent a whole cascade, and you could effectively save thousands of lives just with one act. And that is incredible. Lastly, we're learning how to get through the next pandemic by dealing with this kind of pandemic. So I'm going to close with that. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to you, David.
Thank you, Dr. Seitz. Unbelievable job. What a good perspective. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to your colleagues. Also, shout out to Dr. Ramya Palvia, that's also listening, another doc in Brooklyn that's on the forefronts in the ICU. Doc Seitz a couple things that took notes on. Quote unquote, host cell could not have preluded into Dr. Blasio and Michelle Miller's conversation on how we get out of this and how we prevent it from happening in the future. Asymptomatic shedding. That word shedding has really hit my ears, and it keeps coming back, and it makes me want to wear my masks every time I leave my house. And I think that, this asymptomatic, the demographic of this conversation, most of us are we're biohackers. We're taking care of ourselves. So you may be infected. So how do you want to do your part? You need to put a mask on if you're going out in public, if you're leaving your house in New York City or around the country. And what's that going to do? It's going to potentially save the life of a demographic that's falling into this bubble that could be inflicted by COVID, that's going to find themselves on the surgical suite of Dr. Seitz. So if you really want to do something, wear a freaking mask when you leave your house. It's all you need to do, okay? Other questions, Doc Seitz, I'm going to have for you in the Q&A. Demographics, what are we looking at? Because I really feel the most important thing we need to do here is look at who's inflicted with it so we can prevent it from reoccurring, right? So if the traditional skilled nursing facility is having the issue, what's the different demographic that's coming in? So if you can think about that question before we move to Q&A. And without further ado, I'm really honored to introduce Dr. Patty de Blasio, integrative, functional, and a master's in public health physician. She uses many tools in her toolbox in innovative medicine to keep people out of COVID situations. that we're dealing with on this conversation this evening, and then parlaying into Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist at Physiologic, using blood analysis, stool analysis, and kind of a scientific way to look at nutrition, lifestyle, and health coaching solutions to prevent yourself from falling into a tragedy such as this. Also, Michelle, just a little bit of a plug, podcast you started called Funk, F-U-N-C-U Up, 8-minute bite-size pieces of information. I've enjoyed it so much. You can find that at Physiologic NYC/podcast. So without further ado, thank you guys very much for joining the panel.
Thank you, Dr. Gehrman. We appreciate that so much. And Dr. Seitz, you're giving us so many good things. You're right there on the cusp of everything. And we appreciate all you're doing for us so much, and how you're helping to eradicate COVID-19 and make New York City a standout place for this. You know, as I listen to all of this, I think about that there are basically two ways that we try to eradicate COVID-19 or remove its power. And the first one is we have to attack the virus, and that's what we've been talking about. The second way is to strengthen ourselves. So we're looking at it from the outside, and then we're also looking at it from the inside out. How can we strengthen ourselves so that we can lower our risk from getting ill, and if we do get ill, to recover as quickly as possible? So Michelle and I are going to have a bit of a tag team here to discuss a little bit about how the pandemic could propel us in New York City to create the healthiest big city in the world. And that starts, though, with each one of us individually. One of the things I've been reflecting on, Dr. Seitz was talking about going back and thinking about some things that he learned in medical school. And I remembered when all this started that I had heard a quote from Dr. Louis Pasteur, who was a French scientist back in the 1800s. It's where we get our pasteurization of milk and orange juice and so on. And Louis Pasteur was father of the germ theory. And he spent his life trying to figure out how to get rid of germs, how to promote medications and vaccines and so on to fight germs. Well, that's sort of what we're doing now, what the CDC has given us. How do we actually fight COVID-19? So we're doing stay at home. We're doing physical distancing when we do have to go out, wearing masks, washing our hands, and developing meds and vaccines. What's interesting, though, is that during Louis Pasteur's life, he had an arch rival, a scientist named Antoine Béchamp. And Béchamp felt like that actually it wasn't so much about the microbe, the virus, the bacteria itself. What it was really more about was the person and how they responded, building their health and building their immune system. And he felt like the microbe only really became dangerous when the health of the host itself was compromised. So during Louis' time, he and Béchamp, they just sort of fought back and forth. And ultimately, the story is, though, on Louis Pasteur's deathbed, he said, you know, the germ isn't maybe quite as much as I thought, and maybe the host does have some value here. I think that, you know, the probably the truth for sure lies in the idea that it's both. And that's what we're seeing here, and we're trying to find out amongst ourselves, because we can't begin to understand the complexity of this. Think about COVID-19. We know it's very virulent. People are dying. And yet, as Dr. Seitz said, there are many people who are asymptomatic going around spreading it. They never have any symptoms whatsoever. And most people have mild to moderate symptoms. Why is that? Now, we know a few things, like he mentioned, that microbes are more dangerous, often in people that have comorbidities. They're also more dangerous in people with compromised immune systems, and perhaps even in people that have more genetic risks. it can be more virulent. But it gives us pause to ask ourselves, are there things that are within our control that actually can improve our health and our immune systems and make us less susceptible, not just to COVID-19, but other potential threats, because this may be the first of many that we will face in our lifetime. So as we're thinking about this and what we can do from the inside out, I wanted just to bring Michelle in here. Michelle is so knowledgeable about health in New York City and how it all relates as a clinical nutritionist. Michelle, what do you really think it means to be healthy, and what is the healthiest big city? If that is New York or what city it is, how does that look like? What does that look like?
Thank you, Patty. Can you hear me okay? So health is this kind of larger abstract idea, and I think it's a spectrum. And I think that, we'll go into talking more about diet and nutrition as we go through this conversation tonight. But I think it really comes down to access and education, and that really has to be the pillars of kind of our mission. It's interesting right now, we for many of us, we've never really had a limit in what we had access to. It wasn't difficult for us to run into a Whole Foods and to pick up, some organic foods. But many parts of the city have these food deserts all the time, not just during pandemics. And so I do think that is a major point that we have to touch on. If we do want to be the healthiest big city in the world, we can't just be the healthiest Tribeca and the healthiest Chelsea. We have to be the healthiest city as one unit. And I loved what Dr. John was saying about, we have to look at all elements of our community and work together to build up the health of all of us. But I think just in terms of overall health, it has to be a combination of body and mind. It has to be health where we are practicing sleep hygiene, we are aware of stress management, we are getting proper exercise, and then of course the nutrition pillar has to be there too.
Right. And so you really see that we're not just victims of these superbugs that just seem to spread so rapidly in a global world, but we may actually have a bit of autonomy over things.
It absolutely has to come back to the internal environment. Right now, we're separating ourselves from the external environment, and we have this opportunity to pause and focus on the internal environment. And I'm such an advocate for gut health and understanding that the immune system lies within the gut. And so we have power with every piece of food we consume to influence that gut environment. And again, I hope that we can go deeper into this later on, but this idea of inflammation causing chronic diseases, multiple chronic diseases are comorbidities, and now people are at higher risk right now for losing their life if they're faced with this virus, if they have these comorbidities and these multiple chronic diseases. How do we then re-engineer that and look at decreasing inflammation in our life, decreasing inflammation in our diet, so that we can fight a little bit harder and we can be stronger the next time a wave of virus or bacteria or microbes threatens our humanity and our society.
Thinking about with chronic disease, how do you see diet as affecting that? Because it seems like that in Western medicine, we have a little more trouble addressing chronic diseases, things like fibromyalgia and constant gut problems and autoimmune. How do you see what we can do to help that?
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times our audience at the Biohack the World events are biohackers. And so they're like, we know it's gut health, but my goal is to really reach so many other individuals who maybe are dealing with chronic disease or being, exposed to Biohack the World for the first time tonight. And so it does come back to looking at an anti-inflammatory lifestyle that includes lowering stress and getting proper sleep and proper exercise. But also, if you think of inflammation in the body as like a pot of boiling water, and the heat is the inflammation. And so you want to keep the heat to a point where that water doesn't boil over. Removing inflammatory foods out of the diet, like processed sugar, eating real whole nutrient dense foods takes the takes the fire down, it takes the heat down. And so really in our body, chronic diseases are expressed once inflammation gets out of hand. So if we can dial that back, starting with our food, starting with gut health, that will have a trickle out effect and really be able to help everything from not only our physical health, but also our mental health.
Exactly. So, do you think some of these things that are being presented to just New Yorkers and all of the world, maybe in general, about ways we can mitigate risks and improve our own genomics in our own body? Do you think that learning some of this is going to make a difference for New Yorkers in specific and the world in general once this pandemic passes? Or do you think people may just sort of go back to their old ways of living?
I don't think there's any way that we're going back to our old way of living. I think, even the basic idea of masks, many Asian cities have been wearing masks. It's much more typical to see that in those cities. I think that that will be very typical moving forward in a city like New York, especially how it has hit this city. I think one of my fears is that we are turning into this germophobic community and society, and I do worry that we are so caught up and worried about the bad bugs that we aren't going to be focusing enough on the good bugs, and the whether that be probiotics or good microbes that are in our world that help keep things like allergies in check. And I also just want to say, in terms of gut health, that's where the idea of even like fermented foods come into play, because you want to nourish those good gut bacteria as much as you can. How do you see, though, in terms of measuring genomics or looking at that and inflammation pathways, how can we use the two to kind of get a greater understanding of the role of inflammation?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And when you do a thorough genomic study of yourself, you realize that there are many different inflammatory pathways. And some of them actually directly affect how well you do and how susceptible you are to particular viruses. It's amazing how much true research we have in these areas of people that were more susceptible to SARS or to swine flu or to HIV. And there are many pathways like the interleukins, the TNF alpha, just over and over, we see that some people have more susceptibility. There's some pathways now that, as some of the researchers have gone back just over COVID, and they've been looking at, okay, we already knew some things about SARS before. How can we apply this perhaps even to COVID, because the coronaviruses are similar? And we're realizing that, yeah, we see some people have much higher risk of having lung injury, much higher risk of a cascade of inflammation to cause sepsis, which then leads to organ failure and death. And once you realize that you have more of a risk with these particular pathways, there are specific supplements and other interventions that can be done that actually have research behind them to help you mitigate your risk, so you don't have to go, oh my gosh, am I going to die? And you can say, no, wait a minute, I actually have some control here. I have some autonomy and some power, to make a difference. And I think a lot of supplements that are really helpful with your training that can make a difference, not just with prevention, but also adjunct treatments. What are some of the things you might recommend to some of our listeners tonight?
Yeah, so, I mean, some of the, if you're talking to somebody who's maybe not familiar with supplements or taking any supplements, then I just want them to focus on the basics. Your vitamin D, your vitamin C, vitamin C being a great antioxidant, vitamin D being a great immunomodulator, and then other, you talk about glutathione as one of the superpower antioxidants in the body, or even something like N-acetylcysteine or NAC, which is a precursor for that pathway. We need a lot of antioxidants right now when you're hit with this virus, because you need to slow the spread and you need to be able to clear the body of free radicals, keep that inflammation level in check, and support your white blood cell production as part of that. So those would be big ones. I think zinc is also, I'm so happy that zinc is getting like the press that it deserves to get, because it can really be remarkable. And getting into the system early on, the first couple of days, you're starting to feel a little bit off. And this is really with every virus, not just, COVID-19, any virus you feel coming on, a common cold next winter, you want to take some zinc the first sign of that so that it can get in there and start to help the white blood cells in the immune system fight that virus off a little bit faster.
Yeah, exactly. And Sambucus, a lot of us know about Sambucus or elderberry, and have used that. I found out just recently when it's combined with melatonin, it's even better as a preventive strategy. And so I recommend that highly. I was even able to get that at my local grocery store now that I can't get much of my stuff from Amazon. Um, Also, another great thing are peptides. Peptides are sort of storming the functional medicine world these days. And they've been around actually for quite a while. There's some that are FDA approved even. Um, Peptides are just little proteins that are signaling molecules that sort of tell our body how to do things better. And BPC 157, the thymosin beta 4 and the thymosin alpha 1 are very good. There's a CELANC and a DHHB. All of these have some antiviral properties, anti-inflammatory properties, depending on which one it is, that can be very powerful, helpful, and have low side effect profile, so they're pretty safe. I love isoquercetin. Quercetin I've always heard and used some, but isoquercetin is even more valuable. And sulforaphane, you may not have heard of sulforaphane, but it's excellent in helping to treat, particularly if you have certain genetic pathways. Licorice is still out there, so is spirulina. A lot of us have used spirulina daily in shakes and things. But one of the funnest ones that I found in doing some of my research was on humming, like, humming. And humming literally releases nitric oxide. And nitric oxide protects us against septic shock and viral replication. It's incredible. And that's why if you just start humming, sometimes you just feel so much better. So that's a really cool one, and it's free. Might as well try it for sure. Well, we're about running out of time, but Michelle, did you have any final words of wisdom? You've just shared so much. Thank you for all your knowledge. We appreciate it so much.
I think I will just say, in a city that moves so fast, like New York, this the city that never sleeps. This is a tragic time, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this event was booked out on April 7th, months ago, on a completely different topic. But here we are having this opportunity to talk about this during potentially the week of the Apex, and we have to come out of this better than what we went into it, and use this as an opportunity to pause. In this crazy city, this can be a gift if you look at it that way, and you can really, in these times of pause, you can get really clear on what's important in your life, your health, your relationships, how you spend your time. And so I really urge, if everyone just adopted one new habit, could you imagine the ripple effect of every New Yorker meditating for 10 minutes every morning? That would be monumental in our mental wellness and in the level of crime. But I think if everyone can just choose one habit that they want to shift, one thing that they will use this as the catalyst for change for, we can start one at a time, making ourselves healthier, making our families healthier, our communities, and then finally our city healthier.
Oh, that's excellent. And Physiologic, we're doing a COVID council on Instagram every day. Check us out. We've got a wellness tip. And that is exactly, if you can just do something, just one thing each day and continue to do that, it makes so much difference. Plato always talked about the near and the far. And the near is stuff like, I'm going to eat a donut today because it looks good. The far is saying, you know what, let me think about what that really means and how it would impact my health. So I hope everybody can remember Plato's near and far and just pause a moment before maybe you go for a near choice that might not be as optimal. Just because it's not right around the corner that you're going to have a heart attack doesn't mean that you might not want to think about it. And so in this day and age when we're all trying to stay as healthy as we can to combat COVID-19 and other things, we just encourage you to do so. Thank you guys so much. It's been wonderful to be here. Thank you, Michelle.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, docs. That was incredible. Thank you very, very much. A couple takeaways that I wrote down. Epi, above the gene, dimmer switch. That was very interesting. And quote unquote testing, Michelle Miller. So I think this is really where innovation is going to step into play, and you got to test before you treat. Another quote, old way of living. The whole world got flipped upside down, man. We got to do things a little bit different nowadays. And then, that's why I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. I think this is really how we're going to innovate healthcare. I think this is how we're going to have healthcare. There's a bunch of healthcare providers on this channel right now. And how do we make change? We make change with working with our local politicians. And I think that's the first step, because the community that we've built at Biohack the World, everybody's already being proactive. I'm less concerned about you guys because I know you're taking care of each other. I'm more concerned about getting into the single mother that's in the projects in Brooklyn. How do we foster new change, new innovative healthcare into her apartment? How do we do that with Medicare patients? How do we do that with Medicaid patients? And it starts in collaboration and in talks with innovative thinkers like yourselves, docs. Thank you very much. And innovative thinkers and politicians such as Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. And the first time I heard Pres Adams talk, it was incredible. He came from the streets as a beat cop in New York, worked his way through kind of quote unquote the belly of New York City, worked his way into politics. He's the Brooklyn Borough President, best borough in the world, best city in the world. Sorry. And hopefully, come on, Prez, let's get you into 2021, man. Let's do that. Let's have you sit in New York City mayoral seat. Because if we can change and hack healthcare in New York City, we can change it around the globe. And that's what this is. It's a world pandemic. So without further ado, very honored for you to take time out with us, man. Really appreciate everything that you and Rachel and the rest of your staff have done to put you here. Let's give a hands out for Pres Adams.
Thank you, Dr. Rudy, and the entire team on your part, and my amazing team and crew that's here. I heard Michelle earlier speaking, and she said something extremely profound about if we can all come together and meditate. And I'll never forget this experiment that took place in Geneva, Switzerland, where they took two pieces of matter and they separated the two 7 miles apart, and they impacted one piece of matter, and simultaneously the other piece that came from the same source was impacted. And it just showed how we are all connected. One does not have to be a researcher on quantum physics to understand we come from the same center. The harm that comes to you comes to me. And as we are in the space of coronavirus, isn't it ironic that the destruction that we perpetrate on other living beings, animals are living beings, that perpetration of violence that we're showing is now coming back to haunt us. This is no secret that our overuse of antibiotics, our use of caging animals, our use of overconsumption of meat that's destroying our Amazon, and our filter of our breath throughout the globe, what we have done throughout the years. Dr. Greger's book on bird flu that showed the increase in these viruses and the origin of many of them. It's time to have a real conversation about health, not only with what we eat, how it impacts our mother, but also how it impacts Mother Earth. And we have to have these real talks in a real way, and we can't separate the two. And that is why I'm committing my life to really changing this conversation about the unsustainable healthcare system that we currently have. 80 cents on the dollar spent on chronic diseases, 84 million pre-diabetic, 30 million that are diabetic, just looking at diabetes alone and what it is doing to our country and everyday people. And then you look at the so many other, number one killer of cardiologists is heart disease. Heart disease is one of the largest killers of Americans and is preventable and reversible in many cases by some of the great work of great doctors. And so this is where I am, and this is the space I am in, and I'm going to continue to push the envelope as far as possible to really make families healthy.
Thank you, Prez. Couple words out of that is Mother Nature. You know, so in this pandemic, I think we need to look at our current healthcare systems, but also how we're treating our Mother Nature. Man, we're not treating the world right, and the world is not going to treat us right. And this is what's going to happen, and it leads back to soil toxicities, and you know, you talked about diabetes, you talked about heart disease. Those are the demographics that are hitting this, you know, just using COVID as an example.
Yes.
You know, that's the people that's hitting Dr. Seitz's ICU room, the diabetics, the cardiovascular patients. And as you know firsthand, you were a type, if you don't mind me sharing, you were a type 2 diabetic.
Not at all.
Right. How did you switch it?
No, so true. And I think it's important what you just stated, that 94% of those who are transitioning and dying from COVID-19 have pre-existing conditions, 94%. And those pre-existing conditions are diabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, respiratory issues. And so there's a pathway that many of us followed around these chronic conditions. And I followed the same pathway, 22 years in the police department, abusing myself with my diet and just eating just about any and everything, believing that, you know, one could just consume things that are bad for their body. And it wasn't until after retiring and going on to become a state senator, going through the normal of health problems, prostate issues, high blood pressure, you know, just the normal wear and tear of your body. And I use that term normal with an asterisk. And it wasn't until I became borough president that I was out of the country and I was experiencing some real issues. I thought it was colon cancer because I lost a good friend to colon cancer. And when I returned to the country, I went to the doctor. I had vision loss at the time. I was losing my sight in my left eye. I was also losing it in my right, but my left was substantially basically I couldn't see out of it. And when I got to the doctor, he did a check of my stomach and a check of my colon. And when I came from under anesthesia, he stated that, Eric, you have an ulcer and your colon is fine, but your real problem is your diabetes. Your diabetes is at a coma level, is extremely dangerous. I need to put you on insulin right away. I need to give you medicine, 2 other medicines. So I walked into the doctor's office that day with no medicine at all. I left with something for my ulcer, 3 medicines for my diabetes, something for my vision loss, as well as my high blood pressure and cholesterol. I walked out being a pharmaceutical company just because I went in for one issue and discovered that I had so many others. And he said, Eric, you're going to be on medicine the rest of your life. You may be blind. In a year or so, you have irreversible vision loss. I had a major nerve damage in my hands and feet. They were tingling all the time. I could not feel my right thigh because of the diabetic nerve damage that I received. And it was just a pathway. And I remember in that doctor's office, him telling me I was going to be on medicine the rest of my life and vision loss. And when he first told me I was diabetic, there was a part of me that said, well, you knew it was coming. Your mother's diabetic, your sisters and brothers are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. But when he stated that I was going to lose my sight and I was going to be on medicine the rest of my life, I said, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. Because in the African-American community, we gave diabetes a beautiful name. We says, you know, our auntie has a little sugar, our uncle has a little sugar. We normalize diabetes, and I just refuse to go down that path. I refuse to go through the point of amputation and blindness, and I decided to take a different route, and that's what I did.
Awesome, Prez. Thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on your innovative healthcare/healthcare. So I think we're going to switch over to Q&A right now, and I'm going to talk to the docs that are in the trenches. But I think my biggest question is looking at the demographic of people that we're dealing with right now, and how do we not deal with this in the future? What's our learning lesson here? And it seems like metabolic disease is at the forefront of the patients that are landing in the ER, the ICU, and the OR for Dr. Seitz. So what can we do? This is an organization of people that are kind of the do-it-yourselfer, biohackers, the self-reliant, and I think that's what New York needs to get at. I think everybody needs to have that education, and I know it needs to start in our elementary schools, and I know it needs to start in our elementary school cafeterias. And I know you have initiatives to do that. And that's why I'm following you and I'm clapping my hands, and I know that you're going to hack healthcare. What do you need from us after hearing this talk and the Q&A that we're going to dive into? So without further ado, David Choi, executive producer of Biohack the World, right back at you, brother.
All right. Thank you so much. And wow, I am so honored to have you in the room, Eric. Thank you so much for joining us. I love your story. And it really just hit home because my father also had type 2 diabetes for 40 years and he passed away in 2017. He just never exercised. He tried to eat really well, but he couldn't eat his way out of his issue with type 2 diabetes. So I think it's really important that we talk about this. And like when you go to Western allopathic care, they're going to tell you that diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you have it for the rest of your life. It's not something that you can cure. You have to learn how to manage it with drugs. And this is something that we don't believe in functional medicine. And we do know that we can reverse the conditions, so many of the chronic metabolic conditions that exist and that are plaguing society today. So I did want to also mention that I love that you're trying to solve the health inequality here in New York City. I know, this is a city of entrepreneurs and capitalists. And, I often say that I don't think we can actually solve the income inequality anytime soon, but we absolutely can solve the health inequality. And that starts through the education of our biology and teaching people from a very young age. And again, Rudy, going back to you, what you were saying, we got to get into the schools. We have to teach this at a very early age, and also fitness, like physical education needs to be part and parcel to every child's education here in New York City. And I think that's going to go a long way. So I did I think this is a burning question for a lot of us. And I know that you don't have a lot of time, Eric. I know you have a 9 p.m. meeting, busy man. So how do you see New York City's economy and also our healthcare system? How is it going to be when things start to normalize? And let's just say it's going to be like June 1st or something. But yeah, how do you see the future?
That's a great question. And we're almost we're forced into a place where we cannot continue down the path that we have gone on for so long, where we have really had sick care and not health care. Now we must be proactive. After 3 weeks of going to a whole food plant-based diet, my vision came back, and 3 months later, my diabetes went in remission, and my nerve damage went away. And the cost of healthcare, because I took that path, I saved just personally probably thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we have a project at Bellevue Hospital, the first of its kind in America, which is based on lifestyle medicine. We believe the data from that project and pilot project is going to show that it is possible to really get people off their medicine or to lower dosage and change the quality of life of people. And so this crisis that is really harming a great deal of people with these pre-existing health issues. We're now seeing we have to find a different way of managing that. And we believe that there's going to be a greater receptivity to looking at how do we change our diets. We have a great program in our schools where we moved our children to Meatless Mondays. We think we're going to now finally have conversations about going meatless throughout the entire week, serving the right food to our children, allowing our children to use technology to hydroponics to grow food right in the school. There's no reason we can't grow our vegetables in our school and serve it in the cafeteria. So we think that there's going to be an entirely new conversation around we move to the place of lifestyle medicine. And I'm extremely excited about the possibilities of doing so.
Me too. Thank you so much for that. Do you happen to know Harlem Grown, that organization in Harlem?
Love them.
Yeah, they're awesome, right? Big shout
Yes.
out to Tony and
Yes.
his work up there. He's doing amazing things. So interesting that you bring up that you wanted to do meatless for the students. I also had this idea that we can pacify a lot of our constituents. Like I guess I'm talking more about the prison system, and like, why don't we feed them more nutritious food in order to rehabilitate them on a cellular level, right? And so that's one of my ideas. I hope that I can impart that onto you.
No, I know you're dead on. And let me tell you why you're dead on. And you're so right. We have done an analysis here of all the meals that we serve in the city of New York. Health and hospitals serve a substantial number of meals. The Department of Correction, our prison system, they serve a substantial number of meals. Our school system serve almost 96,000 meals every day. When you look at even Child Protective Services, ACS, they serve meals to children who are traumatized. I believe the city should get out of the business of feeding the crises. We should make sure every meal that we serve should be a meal that's healthy and that allows people as they go through trauma, because when you come in contact with a city agency, for the most part, you experience some level of trauma. And if you are serving the right meal during those periods of trauma, you are helping people heal themselves, and you're putting them on the right pathway that even when they disconnect from the city services, that they know the power of eating healthy. So I'm with you. Everyone that's incarcerated should be on a healthy diet that's going to help them emotionally as well as physically. And you better believe we can make that happen.
Thank you. Oh man, I'm getting chills here. This is music to my ears. All right, Rudy, did you want to pop in with a question here for Borough Prez?
Yeah, Prez, thinking outside the box, man. It's going to get nice out in New York City in a couple weeks and in the next couple months. Maybe just throwing ideas out there, a benefit concert with some music and some innovative healthcare providers speaking the gospel of healthcare reform, hacking healthcare, just to get the word out. Just throwing it out there.
No, that's a great idea, because after the hibernation of coronavirus, having an opportunity for people to find some of our open spaces, Prospect Park, Central Park. We do a concert every year at Wingate, but having in between the shows, really engaging in the conversation around healthy eating and tapping into what we just went through. We just did an amazing video. When you talk about what could healthcare professionals do to assist us, we did an amazing video with over 50 doctors that gave everyday New Yorkers and Brooklynites 3 things that they can do to better help them during this time of coronavirus. 1, give up smoking. Anyone that's smoking, they should know about respiratory issues is a real problem with coronavirus. The second is to make sure if you're on some form of medication to adhere to the regimen so that you don't aggravate whatever issue you're going through right now. And third, go into a whole food plant-based diet. I did a little small YouTube showing those immune strengthening foods that you can eat. And we want to show people that you want to be a good host for nutrients. You want to be a bad host for a virus. And how you become a bad host is for a virus is to make sure your body is strong enough to fight off those viruses.
Absolutely, 100%.
Fantastic. Quick question.
Go ahead.
I just want to throw in a question. Eric, do you actually do you have any say as to what they serve in hospitals? Because obviously, I mean, everybody, when they look at what is being served to people sick in hospitals, they're like, do you want to make them sicker? Like, why do you continue to serve orange juice and, refined carbohydrates? What's the deal with that? Like, can we fix that?
And it's unbelievable. My mom, who's 83 now, mom was also diabetic for 15 years, 7 years on insulin. She went 2 months on a whole food plant-based diet, reversed her insulin, got off her insulin, struggled with, the behaviors of 80 years. She still struggles with those food choices. And when she was in the hospital, she did not want to eat the food because she saw that and became knowledgeable that, how the orange juice, the soda, the ginger ale, the meat, how it was just really aggravating her condition. And so you're right. We were able to speak with the hospital officials here. Health in Hospital is the largest hospital system here in New York. We have an amazing doctor, Dr. Katz, who's in charge of Health in Hospital. We were able to get them to move to Meatless Mondays. Our goal is to say, when you go into the hospital, you're not going in to feed your illness, you're going in to reverse your illness, and we need to get to our hospitals on board with serving healthy food.
Hallelujah. We have light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you so much for that. All right. Rudy, did we want to move into also having Michelle and Patty and John join in here?
100% so. Yeah, I know, President Adams, thank you so much. I can only imagine how busy you are. We really, really applaud you for attending. So maybe let's open up the floor for the rest of the providers. And Prez, how can we help? How can we help New York City? How can we help the world?
Right.
That's the
we all want to help. Yeah, we want to mobilize.
Speak the gospel, man. Let's hear it.
Well, I think that a couple of things. People often don't realize the power of their title. I remember as a police officer, and I would move around the city and talk about issues around law enforcement when I was off duty at social gatherings and social events. Just the mere fact that I stated I was a police officer, it was an E.F. Hutton moment. People would stop and listen. That's the same thing with that DR. That doctor title is so significant. That's why commercials of yesteryears would advertise products with a person wearing a white coat and a stethoscope. They know that there's certain titles in America and across the globe that means that it's significant and it's truth. I don't think we allow our doctors and our healthcare professionals who are in this right space to use their voice and their title to let people know how we can start reversing diseases and how to live a more healthier lifestyle. The video we put out, the PSA we put out today with 50 plus doctors, it is getting a lot of energy because people are hearing for the first time those who we value and trust around healthcare saying you could live a healthier lifestyle. We need to coalesce folks like yourself and be part of this movement. I think the planet is going through a cosmic shift where we are reaching into our own and we're no longer going to allow people to dictate what happens to us. I believe that having you as partners, as we come together and start allowing our voices to be heard via PSAs, via conversation, chat rooms, discussions, and really push this whole food, plant-based lifestyle forward. People are ready. The receptivity is amazing. Coming out of coronavirus, people are going to be looking, how do they have a more holistic lifestyle in many ways? That's why we pushed in our schools our children to learn meditation. I think children should start their day with 20 minutes of meditation in the morning. And at the end of the day, we send teachers away to learn yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. That is why we talk about healthy food in schools. That is why we're pushing this initiative in the manner in which we're doing it. And I think those of you who understand this and you're not in the dark, but in the light, you partner with government to push this conversation forward, people won't say that, well, this is Eric trying to push something on us as an elected official. Is coming with the credentials of those of you who are licensed to practice medicine and live in the spirit of do no harm and let food be thy medicine.
So I love that. And real quick, I do want to plug I developed a digital currency for exercise enthusiasts. I think one of the key strategies here is to somehow subsidize the cost of fresh organic produce so that it's cheaper than fast food or anything that they could buy that's like refined carbohydrates at the supermarket, right? And so I created this digital currency called HIIT, HIIT, which is short for high intensity interval training. And we're working with Whoop, the company Whoop, which is a wearable activity tracker. And so with your physical activity, you actually generate tokens that you can use to purchase one thing, and that's fresh organic produce from local urban farms. And so you're creating this virtuous circle of functional fitness and food, right? And so I think that this is one of the ways. I pitched this to Gail Brewer. She loves it. I was just waiting for the opportunity to come and talk to you and tell you about it. I think that we can really launch this pilot program in a big way in New York City. And can you imagine that nobody could ever say that I can't afford to eat healthy? Well, now you can. You just have to exercise for it. And so I want to work with you on that.
Love that.
We'll talk about that a little bit after the call. But
and the bracelet is cool. I like the bracelet. It's a cool bracelet, you know?
Yeah, it's great.
What's important is there's a combination of things. We often make a mistake, I find, in government where we speak in an echo chamber and we speak to people where we are instead of speaking to them where they are and take them where they ought to be. The power of teaching people how to cook healthy, very simple meals. I do that a lot. How to start your day, how to cook beets. We were at a food pantry and we were handing out items to people who attended the pantry, and we were trying to give them beets, and they were saying, I can't even tell you how to cook it. So showing people methods on new foods, how to use spices, the power of spices, what it means to mix pepper and turmeric together, and your liver is able to absorb the power of that, you know, the power of cumin, of cinnamon. So we need to really take people to the level of where they are and take them where they ought to be. We hand out a chart of showing the definition of spices and how they impact your body and how healthy they are, because we really want to not talk down to people, but to talk with them and show them how they can have good tasting food. Food must look good, taste good, and be good for you. And that is our goal.
It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Love it. Yes. Food is medicine.
I'm following you on socials. Give us the day in the life of President Adams. What are you doing with COVID? How are you taking care of yourself? What are you recommending to constituents, being the healthcare hacker politician?
Yeah, it's a full day. My team is home for the most part. I have about 65 employees. They are all doing their job remotely through telecommuting. I have about 4 employees who, no matter how much I tell them to stay home, they find their way here every morning in Borough Hall. They want to be a part of helping people. Now I understand why we have foreign war correspondents that were on the ground all the time. They're just some people that they want to be in the midst of helping, because we have a large number of seniors who are stuck home and, you know, there's no service provided for them. We have been giving out thousands of masks to hospitals. We have been feeding thousands of frontline employees and essential employees. We have been giving our masks to those who are defined as essential employees. We've been on NYCHA grounds dealing with some of the crises, teaching people how not to deal with becoming a victim of coronavirus, because fighting coronavirus must be on 2 fronts. It must be on the front of those who are in hospitals who currently have it, and then we must be on the front of preventing people from getting it in the first place, and that is something that we have been pushing for. So our day is really consumed with fielding calls, having conversation like this to really engage people in a real way. It's been a full nonstop day. I've spent the last 14, 15 days sleeping here in the office. Thank God I have a shower. But, I'm here on the front line. This is important to me. I'm a firm believer, doctor. I don't tell my police officer to go out every day. I don't tell my doctors and nurses to go out every day. Generals lead from the front. If I want them on the front line, then I need to be on the front line. Generals don't send their troops into battle and ask, how is the war? They lead their troops into battle. That's what I knew as a captain in the police department, and that's how I feel as the borough president. I'm going to lead us into this. We're gonna beat this, and I want to make sure that when we beat it, that we come out not only physically healthy, but emotionally and spiritually healthy as well.
Wow, so inspiring.
Prez, you came in a little bit late after we thanked a bunch of civil servants, and I think that's huge here. There are so many people, all the way to our refrigerator. We live in Carroll Gardens. Our fridge went down. Even the guy that works at Lowe's, his family that is enabling him to go out. If we don't have a fridge, if we're stuck at home, that's huge. There are so many people pulling together, and so many people that we should be thankful for. And postal workers and sanitation. And it's just, I urge all of us just to really thank everybody that you see out. The downtown guys cleaning up Brooklyn when I had to swing by the office today. Just thank the civil servants that are out there, quote unquote, risking their lives for us. They're putting their tushes out on the field for us. So thank you for that. Prez, is there, I don't know if you're at liberty to say, but what are your thoughts on how it hit New York City? I mean, what's the learning lesson in history? This thing came in, we knew it came in around the world. It came from, a different side of the pond, if you will. And we had time to think on it. And I'm getting reporting from various friends and family in the inner hospitals around the country that they're ill prepared. What happened? What's your take? How do we prevent this from reoccurring?
Doctor, that's a great question. And we must do two things. As we navigate ourselves out of these turbulent waters, we must also be in a real-time analysis of what is happening and learning. Someone must take notes of how we have dropped the ball, not only nationally, but even locally. We should not have been caught flat-footed. We should have been better prepared. And I've talked about this often at many events in real-time governing. This has exposed the dysfunctionality of our country, our state, and our city. There's no reason that we're not using real-time analysis to deal with the crisis. You cannot navigate a crisis with a Ouija board. You cannot guess your way through it. We should have a clear understanding of how many PPEs we have in hospitals, how we're going to move around, ventilators, where are our resources, how many people have expired, why, how much testing has taken place. All of these things should be analyzed in what I call a dashboard type system. This is a modern society, and we're using an antiquated method to deal with the crises, and we're trying to figure it out as we go along. That is fine to do if you have the data in real time. Coronavirus is a real-time virus. It's not a weekly virus. It's not an annually virus. It operates every minute. It is doing something differently. I was handing out masks 2 weeks ago because it just didn't sit right with me that the CDC and others were telling us that we should not wear masks when those major flus of yesteryears, we were telling people that they should. And now the CDC has adjusted its conversation about the wearing of some type of covering on their face. But what else is important? Our inadequate communication methods. We have not been communicative to the diversity of this city. Everyone does not wake up every morning and read the New York Times and listen to Donald Trump, Cuomo, and de Blasio. People get their information from different places. I have a Korean community where they don't speak English at all. I have an Ecuadorian community where they only speak Spanish. And so if we're not communicating to people in the manner in which they get their information through their local papers, through their synagogues, their mosques, their temples, the Sikh community, all of these communities, and even those who speak English. I was out in Canarsie speaking to a group of young people. I pulled the car over because they were playing basketball, and I told them, hey guys, you're supposed to be social distancing. They said, what the heck is that? Who's telling them? Who's communicating in the methods that people receive their information? We should have overlaid our census pullout onto the coronavirus information stream. We were already having countless different languages and different networks communicating on the ground around the census, which is taking place now. We should have now took that same army of people and say, we want you now to use your inroads in communities to talk about coronavirus, how to wear a scarf, how to wash your hand, how to make sure you have social distancing, how to do all those things that we were talking in the echo chamber. New York is not just English people who are affluent. New York is made up of a group of people from various immigrant groups, backgrounds, and social economic standards, and we ignored many of them, and we were wrong for doing so.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I was raised here from immigrants from Korea. And this is such an important conversation because we're talking about one of, if not the most predictable of human catastrophes, a pandemic. I mean, we've known that it's going to happen. We know that it's going to happen again, but we still were not prepared. And so there's a lot of people who are just distrustful of the government, and they're thinking, oh, I got to now take it upon myself to protect myself, and I'm my number one resource. And that's really why we biohack, in fact, because we know that we are our number one resource when it comes to health and happiness. We need to be able to we need to be self-sufficient. We need to have radical self-reliance in a lot of ways. And I think that's also one of the really key important takeaways here, is that everyone needs to really learn and be diligent about their own health and not just outsource it to some third-party medical practitioner that may or may not have their best interests at heart. So,
well,
yeah. Great.
Well said. Well said. You know, the goal is, you know, I tell people all the time, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to fight drug dealers that are on the corner in blue jeans. The pharmaceutical company, those are the real drug dealers. The goal is, my mother was addicted to insulin for 7 years, 12 years on metformin and other medicine. So we want to talk about drug dealing, is those that have our parents hooked on drugs, knowing those drugs will never get them right. So you tell me the difference between that drug dealer and the one that's selling crack. It's the same drug dealer, same methodology, but at least on crack, you can get off one day.
I can't believe that we are going to have a mayor that thinks like you. That's just really incredible. I'm excited to no end. So that's all my questions. I know that you have another meeting to head to, but Rudy, did you want to drop any other questions here?
No, maybe just any of the other panelists. Dr. Seitz, if you're still here, do you need anything that you got a powerful politician on? Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
Mr. Adams, President Adams, when I spoke, I believe you weren't on yet, but my the message that I'm trying to get out is masks for all. And just like you said, a way to communicate with the community. And for people who can't go on Amazon and buy a $20 pack of masks, a way for people within the community to use any kind of fabric, and you can sew it together. You know, you can have anyone do it. Any fabric will do. You can add a little filter paper to it, and you can put these on. You can make these for pennies. You can even use recycled fabric from clothes that you want, and you can distribute these masks to the community. I was particularly affected by riding the subway as a physician, and I went into my hospital and I would go up to the doctors and say, "Who here rides the subway right now? Who's riding the subway during coronavirus epidemic?" And they were like, no, I don't recommend that. And then my second question was, you know that our employees in this hospital are riding the subway and they don't have masks. And the narrative out there right now is that masks are for healthcare workers And we need to conserve those for the healthcare workers. But that's actually a false narrative. And right now, it's very important for us to get in the minds and how we get this communication out, because you're absolutely right. There is not, it's hard to communicate with everyone. But if we can find a way to get the message out that, listen, we know you got to go to the store, we know you got to go to work. Eventually, we're going to have to go to work. They're going to have to ride public transportation. And when they do, if everyone can wear a mask, I believe that can really stem the spread of this disease.
President Adams, let me preface that with Dr. Jonathan Seitz, operating room anesthesiologist from Lenox Hill. So he's seeing the last line of patients that are affected by COVID. So I think that, that's a good point. And also, Dr. Seitz, if you can comment on just even the bronch procedures that are happening in the operating room and the contamination that's happening in the hospitals because of the mass contamination and how this outbreak is occurring. And besides even the masks, but just even the clean, dirty applications and the employees leaving with dirty, virus-infested, shedding materials, if you will, spreading those on New York City subways. I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but I would love to hear your opinion.
Well, anyone that's in a contaminated area should be wearing scrubs and should be disposing those scrubs and having them washed at the end of the day. In terms of the virus coming out of the hospital into the community, I don't know. But certainly, I can paint a scenario for you where, okay, so here you got an N95. Okay, say you get one of these at the beginning of the day. You can use this for your shift, and if you're breathing through it and you're with a COVID patient, then you can assume that there's virus on the outside of this mask. Now, just taking it off, you now have it on your hands, and then you set it down. And do you want to put this now back on your face? Because the outside of it's got coronavirus on it, 100%. And then do you believe that putting this back on your face is something that you want to do? But to not do that means you've got to give a new one for every encounter. And the reality is, both here and all over the country, that there's just not enough to go around. So right now we actually just rolled out a decontamination process for these, where we're now sending them in and they're sterilizing them somehow, which has never been done before. We don't I've never seen that happen. We have autoclaves where things that are metal, things that are reusable are cleaned, but to clean and sterilize something that's made out of paper and plastic is a new thing. So that's something that we're rolling out. I believe that in New York, since we are quote unquote the epicenter, that we will get a lot of resources that other places are not getting. And what I'm worried about, right now in New York, I'm worried about the outer lying hospitals, the places, like Forest Hills, like Elmhurst, like some of the smaller hospitals that might not be, the big places that are getting the attention, but the places that no one, not as many people want to go. And then after that, after New York gets over it, then I'd be worried about smaller places upstate or places in smaller communities where there's even less doctors around. And then after that, other places around the country or around the world that are getting second waves or getting. So I think that you're going to have resources that are going to come to New York. And then when we get over this, we're going to have to decide, do we want to send these out? Do we want to keep them? So there's logistically, there's going to be a lot of challenges ahead. I think we're learning more every day. I'm staying optimistic that we're going to come up with solutions, and we're going to eventually get over this.
John, I have a quick question about the asymptomatic carriers. Do you see that you were talking about asymptomatic shedding for a certain period of time? I was also wondering if asymptomatic carriers, will they be long-term carriers? Can they shed it because their immune system's not launching an attack or trying to get rid of it? Or is it are the people who are not experiencing any symptoms, are their bodies still fighting it off? They just are not experiencing any symptoms?
It's a good question, and I don't think we have a definitive answer. I think the assumption right now is that the more symptomatic you are, so the more coughing, the higher the viral load, the more you're going to shed. And someone who's on their way to fulminant, real, as we say, rip-roaring COVID is going to be shedding more virus than someone who's asymptomatic. But that's that's an assumption right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that someone can shed virus for as long as 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that's not the case. We've also heard reports of people getting reinfected with the virus. Again, I'm hoping that's an anomaly, and that typically the asymptomatic people are shedding for, a 5-day period, maybe not even realizing that they're sick, and then getting, maybe being a little fatigued for a few days, and then kind of getting back to, eliminating the virus from their system, and then getting over it. That's what I'm hoping for, but I don't have proof of that. I don't think anyone does right now.
A couple things I've been hearing from people that we think that all New Yorkers are going to get it. I mean, how do you avoid it? If most Americans are going to get it, 40 to 70% of Americans are going to get it. And here in New York City, with the population density that we have, people are saying that we might as well just all get it, but try to be as healthy as possible. Do you think everyone's going to get it here in New York? Like, how are we going to be able to avoid it?
Well, I'm hoping that before everyone, I mean, my parents, live in New York. I'm certainly hoping they don't get it, and I'm telling them to stay home. And I'm hoping that within some period of time that there's a vaccine, or that we have one of these modalities to treat it, such that when you do get it, it's going to be recognized early on, and that you're going to come into a facility that's going to be ready for you, and it's going to know how to deal with you, and then they're going to treat you in a way so that you still have it, but you're not going to die from it. So you may go ill, but it's not going to be, oh, here's the ventilator and good luck. It's going to be, okay, we've got these 4 things for you, and we're bringing the mortality from 2% down to 0.02%. I'm hoping we get that within 12 years, within 12 months. And I'm optimistic within 18 months, hopefully a vaccine for the people who really do. And I think there will be people who self-isolate for the next 18 months. Those people will exist. And for those people, they're just going to wait for the vaccine. And the other thing that's going to happen, and another thing to be optimistic about, is there's going to be antibody positive people. So say you go around the community right now, and this will actually benefit New York. If New York is one of the first cities to really get hit, we're going to have millions. Let's say there's 8 million in New York, 20% get it, a certain number of people die, but then we could have 2 million antibody positive people that are then here to serve the community. People that have already been exposed, who don't have to worry about getting sick. And then that's our workforce. That's our people that are showing up, helping out, going into the communities with a wristband or with some sort of way to identify themselves as saying, I've already had this. I'm not of risk to you, and I'm here to help you. So one way to look at it is get it early, get your antibodies, and then go out and help people. And that's going to be like a rescue force that we're going to have a lot of people. So that's
love that idea.
Yeah.
Cool. Eric, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, just one myth I want to really dispel that we hear in the city a lot, particularly when I speak with my healthcare professionals. We do not have a lack of PPEs. We have a bureaucracy that is preventing PPEs from getting on the ground. There's no reason that we're hearing about nurses and doctors are wearing N95s for weeks. I have a great deal of sister city agreements in China throughout the years, through my travels there and relationships. Once this virus hit here, I called them to get a reading. And in return, I asked them, we need help. Can you give me companies that are distributors? They gave me several companies. One of them, Stan Marbury, who's there, former New York Knicks, he was able to identify getting us 10 million PPEs every week here in the city. We have yet to purchase one mask from him.
Wow.
Another company could also get us 3 to 4 million every week. They have yet to get one mask here from them. Our healthcare workers are choking because of the chokehold we have in bureaucracy. We notice that this is a crisis, but we have a procurement process that hasn't identified that this is a crisis. These are FDA-approved companies that already have done business with state and local governments before. So we're not talking about sham companies that open overnight. The number of companies, my colleagues and I, that have identified that can get these PPEs on the front line, and we have yet to do so, is just embarrassing. And no matter when you hear our high ends of government saying that everything is under control, we don't need PPEs, we have enough of them, that is so far from true. I had a conversation today, a Zoom meeting with a group of healthcare professionals that are stating, Eric, we are in trouble on the ground. We are trying to wash out our PPEs. And I think, as the doctor just pointed out, the virus, the contamination in vaporized areas, being able to use items that really, at one time, if you would walk into a patient's room with an N95 mask and go out and use that same mask in another room, you'll be violating protocols. And now we're saying use that same mask for a week in some cases. It just doesn't make sense. We need to get these resources on the ground. How is the richest country on the globe, in the richest city, unable to get basic tools to their hospital professionals, their police officers, their school crossing guards, their school food service employees? That is why we have been on the ground getting these masks to them. I'm getting thousands of masks into the city. You mean to tell me our state and national government can't get those masks into the city as well? I'm not accepting that. We got to get a better job. And I'm not going to wait until after the crisis to read the reports and have the hearings tell us how we dropped the ball. No, we need to correct the problem now.
Amen.
Is that, Prez, is that, if you're at liberty to say, is that more federal? Is that state? So as a local politician, you're getting them. Are you at liberty to say where really this hiccup is occurring? So
all three levels. We're seeing it on the national, we're seeing it on the state, and we're seeing it on the city level. We turned over information to both levels of government, particularly the state and city, because we're here now. We turned over clear records. 14 days ago, I turned over information of distributors that were cleared, FDA-approved items, and said, listen, they can get millions of PPEs here to this city. This is 14 days ago. So how do you have a crisis on the ground, and in 14 days, you have not made one purchase from these distributors? It is not only my distributors. These are not people I'm affiliated with. These are people that we were able to find, but you speak with other electeds who are telling the same story, that they have turned over distributors. We have letters that have come from distributors that say, here's the letter that was sent back to us from the state and city agencies that say we don't need your items, we're fine. Something is wrong.
Something is definitely wrong. I mean, it has to be a systemic issue. I mean, it's indicative of the fact that we have the most expensive healthcare system in all of the developing countries and the least effective, right? Or it's the most effective. It's the most expensive, but the least effective of all the developing countries.
That's
so
just a lie.
If that's not a scathing condemnation of what we have going on here, I don't know what is. So
I agree. So I have to get on to another call. Really enjoy speaking with you all. And thank you, Doctor. Thank you for what you're doing. Let's continue to move this city and this country to a healthy place. We owe it to our families, those who have died because of things like a bad healthcare system. That is not our future.
Thank you so much, Prez Adams. Really appreciate your presence here tonight. Thank you. All right. John, Patty, and Michelle. Looks like we're right up on time. So I guess I'm gonna open it up to Michelle and Patty if you guys or ladies want to offer any final remarks, encouraging words. I know you had some great words to say at the end of your talk already, but how can people find you? And also, Michelle, if you can speak a little bit more into your mic, that would be helpful as well. You're muted, Michelle.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yeah.
So a big part of my purpose is really to help with the education component. I know that right now, in terms of my patient base, we're able to get stool testing done. We're able to do a lot of testing and kind of evaluate that. But there are a lot of people who maybe they lost their job, maybe they can't afford to see me right now, maybe they don't have access to me for some reason. So I'm really passionate about educating through Funk You Up, which is our podcast, Funk You Up, FUNC. And the idea of education, I think that we are so inundated with the world of marketing and food-like products, not real food products, and spreading the word about events like this, and any topics that are coming up, I like to speak to in more depth on that podcast. So that this idea that I left earlier with was just make one good habit change. Start with one area of your life that you feel you need to bring more attention to, and wherever you feel you're connecting from an educational standpoint, whether that be my podcast or others, start making a little bit more of a health journey with this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Patty, Dr. Patty.
Yes, I just invite everybody again to check out the wellness tips that are coming out on Instagram with Physiologic New York City. That'll give you just another 1-2 punch from what Michelle just said. And I do have a website. It's just my name, pattydeblasio.com. But just appreciate everybody here tonight. This has been so informative, and we just all want to work together. And I love seeing this kind of working together instead of pulling apart in fear. We're working together for the good, and it's really beautiful. Thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Dr. Patty. All right, Rudy, thank you so much for being here and co-hosting tonight, and your input was invaluable. Is there anything that you want to leave our viewers with?
Sure. Parting words, David. Thank you very much for having me, Biohack the World community. Thank you for having me. Let's just keep innovating together. It's such a great community in the sense that we're at the forefront of taking care of ourselves, and we will impact future generations. And we need to teach the public all of the information that are on our chats, all of this innovative thinking and the do-it-yourselfer, and being proactive. So, thank you all. I really appreciate you coming. I'm excited to share. We're putting together, now that kind of times have changed and the brick and mortar clinic is closed, we're putting together a podcast called Holy Fit with a W. And we're going to be bringing on innovative thinkers like David, and politicians and extreme athletes and the do-it-yourselfers to kind of just take a change. So you can find that at Physiologic NYC on our blog post. So just want to say thank you very much. Looking forward to future presentations and Biohack the World next week.
Fantastic. Yeah, can't wait to get you more involved. And John, I know you want to also say a few things. Masks for All, you shared that link. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Just a couple small things. If you really want to take it seriously, I think shaving your beard is a good thing, because these don't make a seal on your face. And if you have a beard, I see a lot of people with beards. I don't think it's not a good time to have a beard.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Adams about not smoking. And also just a good time to just not get sick in general. So not having an accident. And one thing is good about being at home is you're less likely to get injured. You're less likely to get in a car accident or just do something stupid. So I do see a lot of people, getting drunk on Zoom and, oh, I'm home. Let me get hammered. But alcohol is just so bad for the immune system, and waking up with a hangover and losing your first few hours of your day during your quarantine. It's just I think it's really a time for people to say, how can I optimize my health? And because if you do get sick, if you do allow an opportunistic pathogen to enter your body, it's just really not a good time to go to the hospital, whether it's for COVID or for anything else. So thanks for inviting me on. I appreciate the invitation, and it's been great listening to all of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be back on April 16th with Dr. Paul Saladino. So, and Simland. So it's going to be a great talk. We're going to be talking about the ancestral health solution. Lots of compelling evidence for possibly eating high quality animal protein or including more of it in your diet. So stay tuned for that. And all right, ladies and gentlemen, have a great night.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Prayers.